Hello and welcome back to the Second Messiah. On the previous episode of the Second Messiah, Edgar pushed on in Africa in order to finally take all of the territory that we needed. We didn't fully have it under our control, but we at least nominally owned all the lands we needed. In Attila, lots of preparations were being made, led by Geilemir, to stop an invasion by the Huns, an invasion which, as we'll see, never actually occurred. Edgar then ran into trouble. He was defeated by a rebel army, possibly because his own troops were suffering from plague. I needed to free up troops to go and help him, so I had to cut my siege of Palma short. Vidimir made a siege assault. The Italians inside actually came out to meet me and were quite easily defeated, especially when their general went out on a limb and got defeated by my Falksmen. Over in the east, Roderick had to respond to a potential invasion building up near Alexandria. He spotted forces on the border, so he rushed to deal with that. Vithericus was rushing west to fight the Mauryan armies, while the Mauryan navy going east meant I had to recruit new forces in my core regions. Edgar was able to shake off the plague and recruit new forces in order to put down the rebellion around his area. However, the Sassanids then attacked Roderick in the east. This is where he transitioned into a parallel universe save, a reconstructed save where everything's a bit different. This time it was two Sassanid armies attacking, but we had two of our own in defense, so now it's time to fight this battle.
There is no one here who has not heard of it. It is spoken of in every hall from Iberia to India. We have let the Goths go unnoticed, untested, and now they have done the impossible. How many have tried and failed to unite the peoples of Africa? It is not even possible to count. The Goths do it like it was child's play. The strength of their lie is such that it overpowers even basic principles of honor or loyalty, and all lie down before the heretic king Vithericus. And what is worse, they have finished their conquest with endless forces to spare, and they say their god will now create for them a new world that only they shall enjoy. Whatever you think you know about these Goths, these two factors demand the same response. The Goths must be stopped. We must attack while their forces are spread out, to cripple them before they become the giant knocking at our gates. And we must deny them the land their god wanted, if only to break their morale. But if all the earth is twisted enough for their prophecy to be true, to ensure that it is not the Goths who are saved, you might think less of me for my concern. But be assured I am not a man easily stirred to fear. Those who know me and my achievements will confirm this. This is a matter of great import. With your support, I can persuade the Shahanshah to rally all of our forces against the West. Only now will victory be easy. We must take this chance before it is stolen away, be it by man or by the heavens.
The encampment of Roderick's backup army is preparing itself as the Sassanids make this sudden attack. You can see they're attacking from two sides, the east and the south. I had a few cavalry deployed outside who needed to get out of the way because they're going to be right in the path of the enemy's advance. Roderick is bringing the main force in from the north, coming onto the field from a direction that may allow them to intercept the enemy's reinforcements, which is quite useful. At the camp itself, I've got all the entrances garrisoned with units that can set up static defensive formations like Legio with their testudo. The enemy scout cavalry trying to look for a way into the camp end up just fighting with that testudo, which is fine by me. They'll lose troops doing that. The main problem in this battle is the enemy have a lot of archers and a lot of horse archers, and we don't have that much to fire back at them, save for the fact we have towers on the camp shooting flaming bolts at them. So on the southern part of the camp, we're skirmishing with them. On the northern part, this unit of lancers was coming around to where I had my cavalry and camels stationed. You can see the top of their wedge was completely blunted by a huge hail of javelins, and we then rush in with cavalry to fight them, and I'll get the camels in there as well. They're especially good against cav. My cav only light cav, the enemies are heavy, meaning in straight melee the enemy have an advantage, but I'm just going to gang up on them and try and outnumber them there. Other heavy cavalry units have been trying to break into the camp, but the Legio are holding their line. A very thin line, but the enemy are unable to get the momentum they need to break through, and while the enemy are bogged down fighting them, the towers are inflicting casualties. On another front here, another unit of heavy cav backed up by infantry is trying to push through, and I've almost succeeded. I had to reinforce with some Gothic warband to stop these guys from breaking into the camp. Things are looking bad here on the southern front, where some of the enemy's elite swordsmen have easily outfought my legio. It seems their stats were just superior, breaking through now with enough survivors to be a threat, but their morale is already low from having just gone through that fight. So when I outflank them with my reserves, they're immediately shocked and break, even with a decent number of troops left. So that potential crisis was averted thanks to the reserves, but now the enemy's archers will now just switch focus to kill those freshly deployed reserves, and there's not much I can do about that. They'll just run away if I run out to meet them, so the best I can really do is hide inside the camp. What I do is put some of the Gothic warband who are drawing their fire right behind the palisade wall, hoping that some of the arrows will hit the wall instead of them and cause the enemy to waste their ammo. Back up on the north, my cavalry and camels are gone. The enemy came in with, as you can see, tons of lancers and heavy cav, and just completely wiped my cav off the field, so now the enemy have a definitive cavalry advantage here. Roderick's army is just about setting up on a small hill overlooking the battlefield, where he'll be able to move forwards and intercept some of the enemy reinforcements you can see moving across the field in front of him. He's also drawn attention from the enemy's cavalry who are going off to meet him. Back in the camp, these enemy spearmen are just about defeating my Gothic warband here. You can see I've had to position the nobles behind them just in case. Luckily they routed just before my guys did, so I didn't have to use the nobles in battle. On the other fronts, there are no more infantry attacks happening, but the enemy's archer attacks will still deplete my men. I need to keep them in cover and just distract those archers so they don't fire at other higher value units. Now Roderick's army begins its engagement, using skirmish cav to drive away through the enemy's foot skirmishers there on the flank, while the enemy deploy heavy lancers to attack my main line. You can see also their general died at this point in the battle, which is particularly useful. A cavalry charge against my spear wall is unsuccessful, but all the legio behind go wild, throwing their darts, and there's pelters too, I think, throwing javelins into the enemy. Very dangerous. They would kill a lot of our own men, but the enemy are defeated. Here, more lancer charges against Gothic warband go badly for the enemy. Their javelins really cutting down the enemy as they approach. As you can see here, only a few survivors from that lancer regiment make it to my line. The ones that do are able to inflict a decent amount of damage, but they rout very fast, almost all their men dead. So the cavalry counterattack against Roderick has failed. Back at the camp, the enemy are still grinding through my troops, and we are grinding down the men, attempting to do so, both sides taking heavy losses, but things gradually favouring me because the towers will mean the enemy always lose more troops than I do making an attack just because they're delayed, and the towers are very good at killing even the heaviest of infantry. On the southern part of the camp, I've got archers now firing back at the enemy's archers, my only unit of archers, but they're not having any success. Now one of the fronts finally broke. Two enemy units of spears got through my Gothic warband and got into the camp with loads of their strength left. You can see towers everywhere trying to fire at them, and the enemy moved to capture one of my towers. I'm going to have to deploy all these super depleted regiments into combat and just hope they can face them. Luckily I had an unused unit of my own spears ready for a breakthrough, so I was able to deploy them to fight with the enemy. The enemy have numeric advantage, but the tower is shooting into them at point blank range, plus all of these stragglers from the other battles now coming in to join will mean I gradually get an advantage in that little fight and things will go okay. The problem still though is the enemy have tons of archers here. They're raining arrows on my formation, and my spears while fighting with the enemy aren't doing it fast enough, so all these arrows coming down are really inflicting losses on me. The longer the fight goes, the more it'll go in the enemy's advantage if I can't get rid of those archers, but that's what Roderick's for. You can see the balance bars really far in our favour, because Roderick's army is actually very powerful and the enemy have taken too many losses. It's just a matter of actually deploying them in a way to defeat these enemies. With all these skirmishers and with me out of cavalry, it's going to be quite hard to actually force the enemy off the field. You can see my onager is trying its best, firing flaming shots decently accurately. The enemy's horse cav, usually a very difficult thing to do since they'll just dodge everything. But the arrival of Roderick's forces now is starting to have a real effect, especially over here where their general, or one of their generals, was fighting in melee. I was able to hit them from behind with reinforcements from Roderick's army. They routed, and at that moment there was a chain rout in the rest of the enemy's forces, so we didn't have to go about the really annoying process of trying to fight those horse archers and skirmish units by chasing them around with our slower heavy infantry. The onager gets a few final kills on the escaping enemy, and the battle thankfully ends in a decisive victory. The losses in the first army defending the camp were quite large, while Roderick's army is mostly in good shape, adding up to a decisive victory overall despite the losses. But as I've hinted several times, there are plenty more Sassanids coming up who they're going to have to face in the very near future.
You could hear their horns everywhere, like a buzzing sound. I wasn't allowed to look outside, but I could hear them getting closer and closer. Then there was a hissing. Their arrows were falling all around the camp. Everyone outside was shouting at each other. Then there was a massive load of screaming and, well, the sound of warriors fighting at the palisade. I don't really know what happened, only that afterwards the camp was covered in blood and dead men. I wish I could have fought myself, but my mother wouldn't let me. Next time I'll show God my strength.
Let's take a little peek at those battle results. You can see here we lost nearly 1,000 men, the enemy losing about 50% more than that. Most of our losses concentrated in the first army. Roderick's force is still okay. The enemy's army in bad shape, both of them, with lots of their skirmishing forces surviving. At least we're in the end turn sequence, which means we will regenerate troops right after this. Plus, we took on some warriors, which means the leading army will have some of its troops back, so it's not going to be in that really terrible state it was in just now for long. So now we've made it to the next turn. You can see there's another cheeky Sassanid army coming down the coast here, which might want to attack us further down. But anyway, I'm going to show you now what exactly is different about this new world. You can see the Huns aren't attacking Verona anymore because Verona isn't there and our forces are further back, not really needing to be up there defending that race settlement. I've got my anti-Hun army ready and we are at war with the Huns, but they're just not around right now. Curiously, the Visigoths are around, taking the place of the Western Roman separatists there in Genoa. You can see here on the diplomacy that Attila is nearby. He is just north of Italy. He's been moving west from his spawn point. So I don't know if he's going to come down to fight with me, but it looks like right now he might have other things he's going for. One other threat we do have to deal with is this Germanic separatist navy. I'm at war with them as a result of a request from an ally from a long time ago, and they're now right in the middle of my territory, taking me by surprise because I wasn't really paying attention to them as the turns went on. So now Guylemir, guessing he's not really needed up there to fight the Huns, is going to move south to be near wherever those separatists end up. I wanted to do a similar thing with Widimir, who is still in Palma. Previously, of course, I was moving him off Palma to go and help Edgeca, but as we'll see, he's not going to be required. I wanted to move him towards Carthage. I considered going by sea, but I didn't want to risk those Germanic separatists coming by sea themselves and engaging these guys in a naval battle, which probably wouldn't be to our best advantage. So he lands at Caesarea and starts marching east. Caesarea is where Vithericus is currently stationed, and here is Edgeca. This time, no troubles over here. The Mauryans are long since defeated, and curiously the Visigoths have colonies here as well in southern Iberia, which makes our situation even stronger because there are allies there controlling the land bridge into Africa. Even still, there's nothing much for Edgeca to do but to stand on that land bridge and just fortify the area just in case anyone was to try and get onto the continent or be ready to react to any naval invasions that occur. Now, I mentioned last time my new goal in the campaign is to get Vithericus back to the source of the Nile. We have, in Vithericus' opinion, already achieved the prophecy which should detach Africa from the rest of the world and create their new paradise according to God. So he is going to head back to the source, the place where he first received the prophecy, in order to check up on what's going on and try and trigger it. It's going to take a few years, so we just have to survive until then. Now, Roderick is going to be able to chase down some of the survivors of the Sassanid army from that battle. The issue I was a little bit worried about is that chasing them down takes me away from his reinforcement army, which is of course the weaker one, so I can't help it in battle anymore, but I thought it was worth the risk, so I moved out and took out that Sassanid army here on the edges of the Nile with these little run-off rivers. I'm going to take on warriors. I probably made a profit in troops on this battle as well, which is quite handy, and we've gotten rid of them. He can't move back far enough to be in reinforcement range of the other army, but next time he will be able to, so we just have to go one turn without everything going wrong. Unfortunately, that wasn't going to happen. The Sassanids come in with a fresh stack, full of heavy cavalry and with 3 units of onagers. A really bad army to be defending an encamped position against, because they can basically siege me out from range if they want to. I decide to retreat, especially given the nature of the balance bar. That army can't follow me, but 2 new armies appear. First, a nearly full stack stands nearby, and then a smaller army comes to initiate battle. That first army we saw won't take part, which means things aren't dreadfully bad. I think this first army attacking us is the survivors of the battle we just saw at the encampment. So this battle is more balanced. The enemy once again bringing tons of heavy cavalry, and because we're the defenders, we might be able to use this to our advantage, taking up a position the heavy cavalry will struggle to attack and forcing the enemy to put themselves at a disadvantage. So let's head down off the battlefield and give it a go. Where possible, Take the enemy as prisoners. To each prisoner offer them the chance to accept God as their saviour and renounce their old selves. Those who accept are to be provided with arms and joined to our warbands. Those who refuse are to be executed in the presence of the remaining prisoners. The Eastern men will require careful training to ensure their loyalty to you as their leader and to build up their abilities in combat to the standards we all expect of the Lord's warriors. But in the efforts of capturing prisoners, do not ever show trust for the enemy, for until they have been brought to heel, they will betray you without warning, even at the cost of their own lives. The battlefield was fairly flat, so there were no particularly interesting places to defend, but what we did have is a lot of forest. This forest allowed me to hide my entire force at the beginning of the battle so they wouldn't know where I am. Plus, being at the back of this forest means it will break up any charges they make towards my lines, which could be handy. So they'll have to go right through. I believe it reduces the speed of cavalry to 3/4 and probably reduces their charge bonus as well. Their initial army is going to wait for their reinforcements, so they're not going to attack in 2 waves, which would have benefited me, so that's a shame. They're bringing on plenty of ranged units at the back there as well. Once they formed up and started to get close, my onagers could just about fire over the top of this forest and drop flaming shots onto the enemy. This of course means the only thing the enemy will see of my army is the onagers. They won't know the locations of any other of my units, and because the onagers are on the right flank, that's where the enemy are going to focus their attack. You can see they have some of their units actually trailing behind because their cavalry formed up into a big line here, seem to be making a precursor attack, probably because the enemy didn't really know where I was. They didn't form up properly, they just waited for a while and then got impatient. So the onagers will continue to do damage as the enemy get close, but once they do get close, they're going to spot me. Here you can see a few guys just trotting through the trees here, encounter my line as my Gothic warband bombard them with javelins. Unfortunately, this wasn't as effective as it usually is. I was expecting the javelins to wipe out their unit, but actually most of them do manage to just really slowly walk up to my line with both of these units. It's strange how this really slow moving formation wasn't able to be defeated before it arrived, when we've seen full charges be defeated by Gothic warband volleys. Anyway, the bad news is that the other units, now knowing where I am, completely smash through the 2 units of Gothic warband on my right flank, smashing even through to the onagers, forcing them to abandon the siege pieces and go into melee mode. So all of their cavalry barrel into my right side, since that's all they knew about me to begin with. My left side is going to spin round to outflank them, but before that happens, they're going to do real damage. Here on the corner of my centre, the enemy break through and I have to deploy these legio as reserves to fight the enemy's cavalry. The enemy cav will take casualties doing this as well. Their shock cavalry not good in melee, but they've already inflicted the shock they needed. They've destroyed 2 regiments of my infantry, and now they're being supported by these ranged horsemen coming up on my right. They're going to be really annoying because I don't have anything to counter them. I've got 1 unit of archers, that's the best thing I have to fight against those ranged horsemen. So you can see I've sort of reformed my centre and left to form a new line facing the new approach the enemy seem to be taking. I'm trying to recover the situation in the main melee fight here. I've got my camels in there who'll be able to be extra effective against the enemy's cavalrymen, and my infantry are just going to grind down against the shock cav, which in melee will be okay. I'm sending in some nearby units to reinforce. We're attacking this blob from multiple sides. I'm particularly enthusiastic to actually join more troops into this little melee because the enemy's general's in there somewhere. So I've got a chance here to take out the enemy general, but because I'm grouping all my troops together like that into that melee, I'm becoming even more vulnerable to the enemy's archer fire. The Legio will do okay because they're heavily armoured and have high health, but the Gothic warband with low armour and health are particularly vulnerable to that arrow fire. So the enemy's cavalry are being defeated by this mass bunch of troops I've sent against them, and the enemy's general is killed in this melee as well. Fantastic news for our troops, but the losses on our side have been great already. Some of the units, the ones that weren't destroyed, are already down to really low strength. Here, another charge smashes through this unit of Legio, which was running out of the melee. We're going to now surround them and engage them in melee as well, which will then go in our advantage, but we lost so many troops from the charge that it doesn't really matter. These guys are going to struggle to recover for the rest of the battle. So we really need to clear the situation up. I want to form a new line. We've pretty much gone through all of the enemy's shock cavalry. They had quite a lot and we've killed them all, but they killed a good number of us in the process. So I'm going to try and reform. The enemy's infantry have arrived. They've got slingers and spears coming in to engage with me. I'm going to form a new line facing off in an easterly direction. My hope is to get basically a shield line to try and stop absorbing some of the enemy's arrow fire, because the longer I'm out here in this melee, the more men I'm going to lose to that constant arrow fire. They've got bows and crossbows mounted here that I can't hope to kill, so I'm going to try and just get out the way essentially. The camels clearing up the last of the enemy's cavalry here with ease. The cavalry are particularly weak against those camels, but of course there's only a couple of them left. We've taken heavy losses. Here, some of their actual infantry has got caught fighting with my guys, a situation that I'm fine with because mine are simply stronger. Again though, it's just the arrows that will be coming in and killing my troops that I'm worried about. So really these guys are sacrifices, fighting out in front of the rest of the army to draw the enemy's fire. A cavalry charge takes out their slingers, so that's that dealt with. You can see my main line on the left there, further back, where I'm just leaving those units out in front of the army to fight with the remaining enemy units and distract any missile units so they don't fire at my main position. This main position is where I've got my one unit of archers, a mercenary unit, so they're going to use fire arrows to try and combat the enemy's horse archers once they get close. Unfortunately, it's not all that effective. My next hope is that because I'm in the trees and standing still, I'll be able to start hiding all of my forces so that the enemy's horse archers just can't fire at them because they don't know where they are. I've got my own cavalry sneaking around the edge of the forest here, hoping to somehow hit the enemy from behind and catch them between my line and their position. I've also got this really important tiny group of Gothic warband which escaped from the melee and unfortunately encountered these spears out in the brush and was cut down, but while it was just running around out here, it was distracting the fire of the enemy's onager, especially important because you need to waste their ammo. There's nothing we can do against that onager but attack it with cavalry, and my cavalry are going to run off and not attack the enemy's horse archers in order to do that, because if I leave that onager alive, that could be very dangerous. So now my troops are in their new formation. They're going to wait and reassess the situation.
Where is Eric's band? They ran out. Their artillery saw them. I think they wanted to distract them. And the Eastern Horsemen? They ran out towards the enemy too. I don't know if they defected, ran, or sacrificed themselves. So it is just us here left. We'll be picked off like meat on a bone without support. Tell everyone to get their heads down and stay still. They clearly aren't sure how many of us are left, or they'd be upon us by now. It's up to the Lord now, for a miracle is all that can save our skins from these heathens.
The enemy's arrow bombardment just continues. Some of my units successfully get into hiding, others seem to take a longer time, and all the while they're exposed, the enemy continue to rain arrows down on the area. I'm shuffling backwards to try and increase the hiding process, still keeping units out in front to act as draws for the enemy's arrows if the area does get discovered. My cavalry who went to fight with the enemy's onagers were successful. They did manage to scatter the crew. The main problem was they were followed by a whole bunch more of the enemy's ranged cavalry. They're fast enough to keep up with me and just kept bombarding me with arrows the whole way. I couldn't escape from them, and so this cavalry unit has effectively been defeated. Their morale about to break as even more arrows chased them around. I wanted to try, if I could, and draw the enemy's horse archers just generally away from the main location of my fight, but those cavalry unfortunately routed at this point, so it's not going to happen. However, I have successfully hidden all of my forces now, so the enemy don't actually know where I am. They've forgotten that they saw me here earlier, effectively, so all of the enemy's units will now not act in a cohesive fashion. They'll have to just look around for me, which will give me some form of reprieve in which to organise myself. The main issue, of course, is that there's not all that much I can do. I started just shuffling around inside the forest, forming a line, but I don't have any ranged units left, so I can't engage with the enemy's horse archers. All I can do is let them shoot me. If I run at them, they will just run away, so there's no point even moving. The only strategy I can really do, the only one I could think of at least, was to stand still in anti-ranged formations, such as shield wall, and just try and deplete the enemy's ammunition so that they would either leave or try and go into melee. You can see also before that, thought I would just shuffle away. There was no time limit on the battle, by the way, so I couldn't just go and hide in the edge of the forest and wait for the enemy to leave like that. I had to do something. Unfortunately, what I did wasn't a very good idea. I exposed some of my troops, my general at the front for some reason, don't really know what I was thinking. The general was killed pretty much immediately in the first volley of the enemy's arrows, and so the rest of the troops didn't want to go with my plan of standing there in testudo and just absorbing the enemy's fire. They decided to leave instead. Perhaps the sensible logical choice. I guess perhaps I was thinking the enemy, the general saw his high health and armor will make them good at receiving arrows as opposed to my other Gothic units, but still, it was a bad move, but perhaps it wouldn't have gone any differently even if the general had survived until the end. A decisive defeat for this reinforcement army, the Watch. Now I thought this would mean the army would be wiped out, but as we'll see, some of them managed to actually escape the battlefield. We've lost the vast majority of our forces. On the enemy side, you can see we took out all of their melee cavalry just fine, but the ranged cavalry still in perfect health. There just wasn't much we could do about them. Even killed some of their infantry there as well. Got both generals, so that's something. So survivors of that battle do escape. I thought they would all be destroyed at this point, so we've got a few extra units to work with, and the Sassanids then seem to be consolidating their position back near where Roderick is. I'm guessing they're planning to attack Roderick. So the Watch, with a fresh new general Heathin, immediately hires a few mercenaries to get their strength back up. I'm told for some reason all this news upon hiring the mercenaries, but anyway, I need to now plan what to do about the massed Sassanid forces. We've got a couple of different armies to deal with. We've got one stack here which is damaged. This army doesn't look particularly threatening, but it does still have those ranged cavalry units that I'll need to be careful about. The main problem is that stack there of one full of cataphracts. And we've got Roderick as our main tool against them, but I didn't want to go and engage with the enemy. I think the enemy have an advantage. So I decided I would pull back across to the other side of the Nile. From here I can make a fort, and if the enemy attack that fort, it'll be in reinforcement range of Alexandria, the city, and that will give me some extra units in the battle. Plus I'll have the fort towers to fight against the enemy's ranged cavalry. You can see inside Alexandria we've got a pretty decent garrison with a few units who could be useful in the battle. So I'm going to basically make that defensive formation. It does mean the Sassanids are free to move south and just ignore Alexandria if they want to. So to deal with that, I'm going to move some more forces. First I'm just checking the other side of the sea here to see if there's any naval invasion alert they might be about to start, because I've got the Shields of Eden. These are the guys who I just have hanging around in my back territories to deal with things like Macran incursions. But because it looks safe, they're going to move up. The Watch will move down, and I'll try and link these two forces up to just stop the enemy moving any more south than Berenike, so they can't get into the actual core territory further down the Nile. We can still keep them somewhat hemmed in. We'll see what happens in this war next time. The Sassanids will come in for another attack as Vithericus sneaks closer back to the source next time on the Second Messiah.